Hello, time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are The Guardian's sports writer, Jonathan Liu, and the Daily Mail's chief sports feature writer, Riyadh Al-Samarrai. Welcome to you both. Let's run through the back pages. We'll start with The Times, who lead with the story that the FA Cup is to get its own anthem. The FA are looking at what is described in marketing speak as sonic branding. Yep, for the world's oldest cup competition. Interesting. They also cover England's cricketers losing in Sri Lanka. When will England's slump end, they say. They also carry the news of FIFA President Gianni Infantino's pop at British football fans and midfielder Casemiro to leave Manchester United, which we will be discussing. The Express lead with the FIFA President Gianni Infantino once again. Their headline, cheap shot. Brit fans the punchline for Infantino's bad joke. They also cover the cricket as England lose to Sri Lanka in that one-day international. The positive spin, Brooke back to work, but England lose again, they say. And the Guardian carry the cricket as well. Same old England, they say. Brooke left in a spin. Plus the latest on a potential $1 billion tennis breakaway. The headline reads, Players' rival tour plan edges sport to the brink of civil war. They also carried a story of another blow for Tottenham Hotspur. Cursed Frank and Tottenham rocked by Bergbout injury, they say. In the Telegraph, Unai Emery in spat with Tielemans after their Europa League win. They also have the tennis news. Rebels step up $1 billion breakaway threat, they say. And in the Mirror, Rat Pack, Old Trafford faithful slams Chiefs. Jim is in bed with Glazers, out of his depth, and will let them know. They also carry the FIFA chief cheap shot at England, again focusing on Gianni Infantino. Yeah, I mentioned that Casemiro line, Casemiro leaving Manchester United at the end of the season. After 4 years at the club. We'll start with The Times, which is carrying this story. Jonathan, I wonder how his time might be remembered at Old Trafford. He's had somewhat of a renaissance, hasn't he, in the last 12 to 18 months?
Very much so. You know, I think he will be fondly remembered. I think when he joined from Real Madrid, I think there were obviously a lot of question marks over his wages, over, you know, his physical condition, and possibly even his motivation, you know, having served Real Madrid so well. You know, a lot of players have come from a big club, have come to the Premier League at that sort of age, and you know, not really performed or not really been at that level. The nicest thing you can say about Casemiro is that he never stopped giving 100%, and one thing I love about him as a player is his full throttle commitment to every single second of every minute of every game. Whether it's, you know, the tackles, and some of them were a bit spicier than people liked, or whether it was the crucial goals, or whether it was the ground he covered. Even at the Manchester derby at the weekend, after he's been substituted, he's on the bench and he's literally still kicking every ball and celebrating and like just fully committed. And I think he deserved better, to be honest, from Jim Ratcliffe at United, than to be named as one of those players who has been overpaid and that they inherited from the previous regime. I thought that showed a great player a lot of disrespect. So I'm glad that he's had a bit of a renaissance, and he'll now get his exit. Obviously, it makes, you know, a certain amount of financial sense to get his huge wages off the books. You know, if United try to rebuild financially, you know, that's obviously a no-brainer of a decision to take. But I think he's served United quite well. You know, I think United fans will be very pleased with his contribution, and I think he will be very fondly remembered.
Yeah, and as Ian Whittle says in this Times article, the announcement was made now at the request of Casemiro because he needs time to find a new club, Riyadh, and teams perhaps in Saudi Arabia interested in signing him. Is that his most likely destination next, you think?
I think I read a report from Simon Jones in the Mail this evening that LA Galaxy are also circling. So look, there are going to be people interested in him. I think to the point Jonathan's making there, you know, he did get saddled with this flop tag pretty quickly, and they tend to be quite hard to wash away, and it was unfair. I think if there's one thing United are going to miss from him it's putting a price on that kind of elite player mentality, which probably not enough people at United do have currently. And you can't dispute Casemiro's record, and certainly in the past year and absolutely this season, he has been one of their best players. So they are going to miss that, but 350 grand a week does go a long way. He's a month shy of turning 34, so it is probably a good time. But I think, again, in following what Jonathan's just said there about Jim Ratcliffe's comments, he does deserve to have some respect for the work he's done there, and there will be a market for him. We're not going to be talking elite level players again because of elite level clubs again because of the age he's at. But LA Galaxy are interested in him. Saudi will certainly make an offer. He is a high profile player. There will be clubs that want to maybe give him another season or two.
Yeah, and you wonder whether this might free up space for other midfielders to come in, if not in this window, then in the summer. OK, staying with United, we're going to go to the back page of The Star. Look at this headline. You dirty rats, Sir Jim hammered for siding with Glazers. Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been branded a clown who is out of his depth by Manchester United fan group 1958. The group expects more than 6,000 fans to protest against United's ownership before their next home game against Fulham a week on Sunday. Jonathan, what do you make of this?
Well, I'm vaguely encouraged actually that the fact that they've beaten Manchester City, they've beaten their rivals, doesn't change any of the underlying facts around the club. Often, you've seen regimes at United almost try and wait out these kind of protest movements until the weather changes. I think there is a really concerted effort amongst a lot of United fan groups right now, not just the 1958 group, because there is a sense there amongst United fans that they've essentially been hoodwinked. They've been taken for fools. That Ratcliffe and his merry men came in promising renewal, promising change, promising a different way of doing things. In fact, they are in a very real sense stooges for the Glazers, who retain all the power, who retain all the control and influence over the club, who can't be shifted. It's actually harder to shift them now, and now have a very convenient human shield for the many structural failings at the club. United fans have been taken for fools for the last 2 or 3 years, and I think there is now a concerted effort amongst a lot of them that this is not a state of affairs that they want to continue, that they're not going to persist indefinitely with this reign of mediocrity and this lack of accountability.
Yeah, I wonder then, could Kobbie Mainoo be part of the answer to United pushing forward? It seems as though United do now want to keep him. He was frozen out initially, wasn't he, by the previous manager, Ruben Amorim. But to our own story here at Sky Sports News, Kobbie Mainoo contract, Man United ready to open talks with midfielder over a new deal. So, Riyadh, it looks like from someone who was just a fringe player only a few months ago, could be front and centre, particularly now with Casemiro leaving at the end of the season.
I think most people would agree there's plenty of sense in them doing what they can to keep him. It was, given everything we say about Manchester United, this proud tradition of promoting young players, him being pushed to the fringes was a pretty bad look for them. We are not too far removed from his brother wearing a free Kobbie Mainoo T-shirt, which, whatever we might think about those kind of protests, I don't know, but his desire to get a loan to Napoli was very real, and they almost lost him. I think that would have been a really sad conclusion for them, given the amount of talent that he has, and he will now go on to show as well. I think clearly Carrick holds him in higher esteem, or certainly has a system that is better suited to accommodate him than Amorim did. He got his first start in the league this season against City. You would assume from the noises Carrick has previously made about him as well that he'll get plenty more now in the second half of the season, and that can only be a good thing. He's 20 years old. He's versatile. He can take that ball in tight areas. He is resistant to a press. He is excellent technically on the ball and his distribution. I think there's huge potential in him, and if anyone at United was willing to countenance letting him go, I think that would have entirely typified what's going wrong at that club at the moment. But thankfully, Carrick doesn't see it that way, and I would imagine plenty of others as well. So I think it'll be a popular move, and certainly the right one as far as I see it.
Yeah, glowing assessment there from Riyadh. Johnny, do you agree with that? Can Mainu, I suppose, shoulder the responsibility of bringing this United side into a new era?
Not yet. I mean, like he's what, 20, 21? I think one of the mistakes that we make as a kind of a footballing culture is when a player first breaks through, you kind of assume that they get this big hype up, and then they're almost expected to be the genuine article. He needs to play. He needs to play, and he needs to play, and he needs to learn. He needs to learn from the likes of Bruno Fernandes. He needs to learn from the likes of Mason Mount. He needs to learn from the likes of Michael Carrick. I wonder if there's a certain affinity there. Another great United central midfielder who wasn't charging all over the place. He didn't scythe into stupid tackles. He was almost kind of underappreciated in his time. For being a technical midfielder of such great passing range, such time on the ball. So there is still a huge amount of development, but players at that age they need game time. They need the trust of a coach. They need a little bit of freedom and latitude to make mistakes, and they obviously need to be rewarded for their work as well. The reports saying that he's on something like 20-25 grand a week at the moment at United, which is obviously by no means commensurate with the talent that he has. So a new deal, and if that translates also to long-term trust and confidence in him as a player, then I think everyone's a winner.
Yeah, be interesting to see how he progresses next season with more of a starring role at Manchester United. Now, there was British teams in action in Europe. Good night for Villa, a 1-0 win against Fenerbahce. Back page of the Mirror has covered this right at the top. Also saying that Sancho, oh, what a night, Villa. Also in the back of the eye as well on the sidebar, Sancho header puts Villa into the last 16 of the Europa League. So, Riyadh, a good night for Villa. They got the victory, and it means that they've qualified automatically for the last 16 with a game to spare.
They're in good shape. I'd still be intrigued to understand exactly what happened with Unai Emery and Tielemans at the end there. A little sort of pushing and shoving on the touchline. I think the consensus seems to be that he wanted him to walk off the pitch and slow things down. I'm not sure there's anything massively nefarious in there. He is Emery and Tielemans are very close. I think Emery actually described him as his son after the match, but without a broader explanation, or one that I've seen anyway. So no, that was a little bit odd, but that was a good result for them. I thought 1-0 probably flattered Fenerbahce a little bit, but I think if you look at the Europa League, where Villa are in there, Emery's own history and appreciation of the competition, they've got a massive opportunity to get a trophy there, and I think on the balance of their season so far, you'd argue they probably deserve one as well.
Yeah. OK, thank you very much for the moment, Riyadh and Johnny. We're going to take a quick break now, but when we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this in the Times. FA Cup to get its own anthem. More next. And this in the Express. Cheap shot. Brit fans take the punchline for Infantino's bad joke. We'll be discussing that next on Back Pages Tonight. You're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to The Guardian sports writer Jonathan Liew and the Daily Mail's chief sports feature writer Riyadh Al Samurai. We're going to go straight to the back of The Guardian and talk Tottenham Hotspur. As you can see, the headline on the right-hand side there, cursed Frank and Tottenham rocked by Bergvall injury. Thomas Frank feels Tottenham are cursed with injuries after confirming that Lucas Bergvall may face an extended period on the sidelines. It's an ankle injury, and you add that, Jonathan, to the list of injuries that Spurs have at the moment, the likes of Maddison and Richarlison and Bentancur, and you can understand why Frank's taken this opinion that his team are cursed.
Yeah, and Bergvall is obviously a huge miss. He's been one of the real breakthrough players of the last couple of seasons, possibly one of the best players, full stop, over the last couple of seasons. You know, it leaves them with Conor Gallagher and probably Archie Gray in the centre. And I was really looking forward to seeing how Bergvall and Gallagher played together. I really thought their styles would complement each other quite well. Equally, you know, if you're Thomas Frank, you're kind of on the verge of getting sacked. You've got to deal with it. I mean, this is, you know, injuries are a part of the modern schedule. You know, you have to deal with it. You know, your predecessor, Ange Postecoglou, had to deal with it. Not very well, but he did. And you know, he's essentially fighting for his job here. They go to Burnley at the weekend. I think if Spurs don't get a win there, it's hard to see Frank staying in a job much longer. So, you know, all this may well become irrelevant soon.
Yeah, how much could this derail their season, Riyadh?
Yeah, no, I feel sorry for Thomas Frank on this. You know, as we were just saying there, you know, he took 13 injuries into that game with Dortmund. I think most of us objectively expected them to get a total hiding on the basis of how Dortmund have been this season, that Tottenham could lose to West Ham. And that was obviously a great result for them. And then to get another injury out of it, nothing is really going in his favour. And I think when we talk about Thomas Frank, you've got to balance it against the fact, look, he has underperformed with the players at his disposal. I don't think anyone would argue against that at this point. But we are also talking about a squad that, at best, I would say is mid-table. There's another back page there about Mickey van der Ven. Him and Romero, I would make as probably the only two players in that squad who are solidly top six. So Thomas Frank is fighting against the perception of Tottenham and trying to balance that with the reality of Tottenham, and these injuries really don't help him whatsoever. I think he's been generally left underserved, as have a number of Tottenham managers, by the players they bring in, or rather the recruitment they do. They spend a huge amount of money on transfer fees. They don't spend enough money on wages. They do overpay for the players that they do have, and the manager is the face of this wider cock up. And you know, this situation with the injuries really compounds it. Just in the last few weeks alone, Kudus, Richarlison, Davis, Bentancur, now Bergvall. It is a horrific run for him. So I think even the people who are booing him at just about every opportunity right now, they have to have some sympathy for the wider situation he's working with.
Yeah, it seems like Thomas Frank is fighting on all fronts at the moment, isn't he? OK, now let's move on to the FA Cup and the back page of the Times covering this story. FA Cup to get its own anthem. Imagine that. Football Association looking at sonic branding, as it's known, for the world's oldest cup competition. Jonathan, this really does intrigue me. Sonic branding, its own anthem. We all know the iconic Champions League music. Could we be seeing the same thing in the FA Cup?
Yeah, Sonic branding, great band. Saw the Astoria back in the day. I don't know. I mean, the Europa League has its own anthem. Can anyone hum, like, a cash prize available for anyone who can hum the Europa League anthem or the Conference League anthem?
You know, it seems like every pub quiz question.
Right. I mean, the hardest music round in the history of pub quizzes. I think, you know, this is just it's very typical of how people who sell and organise sporting competitions seem to think these days, where, you know, that they concentrate on the branding and they concentrate on the little accoutrements and the decoration around, and don't address the fact that, you know, why do they have 6 games? Why do they have 6 third round games on a Friday night? Why are attendances so low? Why is Why is prize money so low? Why have they scrapped replays, which were a lifeline for so many lower league clubs? Until you address these structural issues with the FA Cup, everything else is almost kind of window dressing. And the fact that they think they can revamp this competition with a jazzy new tune, I kind of encapsulates that sort of thinking.
Are you up for a catchy new FA Cup tune, Riyadh?
I want to be grumpy about it. I find it a little bit inoffensive. I don't care about it in the sense that, this is wonderful. They've given the FA Cup a tune. I'd agree with Jonathan that there are far more egregious sins that they've committed with the FA Cup, particularly around the replays. But adding a tune, I'd love to be incredibly grumpy about it. I just can't.
OK, that's fair. Martin Ziegler, with this exclusive, by the way, writes that the FA Cup anthem would be played in stadiums during player handshakes from the early rounds through to the final at Wembley. It would not replace Abide By Me, the traditional FA Cup hymn, or any music played by clubs when their teams run out. OK, staying with football, and Gianni Infantino, back page of The Express. Cheap shot, they say. Brit fans, the punchline for Infantino's bad joke. He's made a joke, Jonathan, about the fact that no British fans were arrested at the Qatar World Cup in 2022. I suppose he's harping back at the bad old days of when English football fans in particular were seen as hooligans and getting in all kinds of mischief. Cheap shot, flippant comment. What's your take on it?
Yeah, look, I mean, as a lifetime maker of bad jokes, my heart goes out to Gianni. So close to humour, and yet so far. There is, I guess there is a slightly more serious point to all this, in that Infantino has had many public stages over the last few years. You wouldn't see him make a joke like that about Saudi fans, for example, or American fans, or even Argentinian fans. I think the fact that he feels empowered to have a little pop at British fans, I think it's emblematic of how low this country's stature has sunk in terms of the corridors of football politics, how low they've sunk in terms of the priorities of Infantino and the FIFA top brass. No secret that they don't like the British media. They don't like a lot of the investigative journalism that's been done into FIFA corruption and FIFA scandals over the years. They don't like a lot of the scrutiny that has come onto their geopolitical dealings, and that is ultimately what this is about. He thinks that he can punch down at the home nations because he feels they're a soft target, and ultimately he doesn't care what they think. Yeah.
We're almost coming to time, but Riyadh, I just want to ask you about golf, because I know you've covered this and this. I don't want to say war of words, but there's been a bit of a disagreement between Tyrrell Hatton and Rory McIlroy about the payment of fines and that jeopardising Tyrrell Hatton's involvement in the Ryder Cup. What's your take on this? It doesn't seem like Tyrrell Hatton is willing to engage in this discussion.
And to be honest, I don't think he's even particularly aware of what stage they're even at in this process around the appeal him and John Rahm have both made. They're both refusing outright to pay these fines. The issue has been kicked down the road for so long that they were able to play in the last Ryder Cup. They're presumably not going to be able to drag it out beyond a Demona in 2027. So there needs to be a resolution. Now, Rory was obviously very pointed in saying that Rahm and Hatton, and indeed a couple of others who are in the same boat, just need to pay up. If they truly love the Ryder Cup like they say they do, they will pay the fines and get on with it. The fact that they were paired together today in Dubai was mildly amusing as a side point to that. But they didn't speak about it during the round. They spoke mostly about Tyrrell Hatton's weight gain over Christmas and what bottles of wine.
Gonna have to leave it there, Riyadh. Thank you. We've come to time. A pleasure to have your company, Riyadh and Jonathan. Stay with us here on Sky Sports News. Much more on the news that Casemiro will be leaving Manchester.